Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and ever since Midnight Beta came out, I've been playing the game kind of religiously. I haven't been able to stop myself from testing all the different class changes and trying out new builds in different dungeons just to find out which classes are looking like the strongest so far. Now, I've been a rogue main for a couple of years now, a couple of expansions at this point, and I've been around playing all three specs for a very long time, but I think this is the version of Assassination that I'm probably enjoying the most when it comes to Mythic Plus content. Assassination has always been fun, but it's never really been my priority spec. I usually end up sticking to Outlaw for just about everything I do, but I think Midnight Beta is convincing me otherwise. This is probably one of the most fun that I've had with Rogue in a long time, and I feel like this is probably the best version, the apex version of Assassination that we've seen. Even though it is mired in a handful of bugs that do dampen some of its gameplay, it is still incredibly enjoyable and definitely worth checking out if you are looking to play Rogue in Midnight potentially. So for today's video, I wanted to go over exactly what makes Assassination Rogues incredibly good to play in Midnight, and how some of the changes in Midnight really do make me convinced that this potentially might be one of my most favorite Rogue specs to play for Mythic Plus content from here on out. With that being said, as always, if you guys want to keep up with the regular Midnight updates, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Now, before I go in and glaze this spec, this wonderful playstyle, and how good it feels to play in Mythic Plus dungeons, because it is amazing, it's definitely worth your time. We are in the beta realms. We are playing on realms that are not fully functional. There are going to be some bugs, there are going to be some issues, and unfortunately, Assassination was hit one of those bugs towards their apex talent of Implacable. Unfortunately, the talent is supposed to give you more energy. The more Envenoms you're able to chain back to back, essentially hitting Envenom right before the buff falls off. Whenever you run out of energy eventually and you can't chain Envenoms, it's supposed to give you a big surge of energy, up to 80% additional energy or 80% energy increase over 5 seconds. But right now, it's actually doing the opposite. Instead of giving you more energy, it'll actually give you less and less energy. So it's actually kind of better to just not chain Envenoms, because it'll give you 20 energy instead. So sometimes you'll see me play this spec a little incorrectly. I am still going to chain Envenoms for big damage during like Deathmark or Kingsbane, because of the damage kind of outweighs like the smoother playstyle, but sometimes I'm just going to let Envenom fall off so it gives me a bit more energy. It just feels smoother, it just feels better, but hopefully either this week or next week, they'll have a fix for this bug so we can really play the better version of Assassination. That being said, for the most part, Assassination doesn't have that many bugs as of this moment. Not all the talents work 100% perfectly. Some of them do have some scaling issues, but for the most part, a lot of your AoE kit that allows Assassination to truly shine within Mythic Plus content is online. It does function with some absolutely magnificent changes that they did for Midnight in particular. Assassination has always been a bit of a quirky playstyle when it comes to AoE content, mixing in single target damage abilities with a little bit of this cleave playstyle that allows you to either focus on like spreading dots on multiple targets with your bleeds, or hammering down single target high quality envenom hits and poison damage that then splashes onto nearby targets. So playing that playstyle over on the live realms or more within sometimes can be difficult and even cumbersome at times. You know, tap into a new target, applying your bleeds, then switch it to another target, applying your bleeds, another target, applying your bleeds, especially when you have enemies like, 20 enemies next to each other. That's a lot of targets you gotta get through. And there's a lot of simplification that be done in Midnight specifically in order to make that AoE gameplay for Assassination much better in Midnight in particular, by really taking some of the cornerstones components that make up your AoE damage, which is Phantom Knives, Spearing Bleeds, and Poison Cleave, and try to make it as easy and simple as possible. One of those good changes are changes to Spatter, which I think it's incredible. The fact that Envenom and Kingsbane are the abilities that apply Caustic Spatter means you no longer have to weave Mutilate into AoE gameplay, which felt always weird to weave in a single target combo point builder when you should just be spamming Phantom Knives instead, because you're hitting multiple targets at the same time. But with the Envenom and Kingsbane, that just becomes really easy for you to keep up Spatter. It deals 40% of its single target damage onto nearby targets with the soft cover 5, but it still is highly effective and promotes you to mostly focus on single target damage abilities for the most part as your comp point spender, which Envenom being like the only comp point spender, outside of maybe like Rupture and inside of Kidney Shot, that's your primary comp point spender that you're going to dump damage into when dots don't need to be refreshed, and it feels really good to play into. They got things like poison bombs, so your envenoms can also proc big AoE damage on top of it. You also got fatal concoctions, so your poison weapon applications actually do apply towards spatter because it's any nature damage that splashes, not just envenom and poison damage, but it's just really nice altogether. And I love just how strong spatter is, as it continues to allow you to have this like singular target focus build where you can build for a lot of single target towns and just cleave things around you. The other cornerstone of Assassination Rogue AoE is Crimson Tempest, which is kind of like a modified Fan of Knives. It's a good talent, and I like this version of it, but what essentially does is when I put a bleeds on targets, which is it Mio? Yeah, their masks a little bit inverted. I don't even know if they really need those PvP masks over their heads. But whenever I have all those bleeds on a target, when a press comes to Tempest, it just spreads all of those bleeds to everybody else. It'll take like the highest duration bleed, so like if I refresh Garrote and spread it, it'll spread that refresh Garrote to nearby targets. There is a bit of a target cap with this ability, unfortunately, but it doesn't really detract from like the enjoyment of the ability. It spreads it to like 2 nearby targets, so in like a big pack situation, you may have to press Crimson Tempest a couple of times, but it's an ability that generates combo points, and if it lands crits, it also can generate you a bunch of combo points very quickly with Seal Fate, and it is one of the more convenient ways for you to be able to spread bleeds while still keeping that singular target focus, because for the most part, all I do is just focus to make sure my bleeds are refreshed and are maintained on my priority target, and then I just use Crimson Tempest as a filler ability to generate combo points while also spreading bleeds if anybody else needs bleeds. It's a bit of an expensive ability, but for what it is able to offer, I do like what Crimson Tempest does on its own, and I think it makes managing dots a lot better than like tap target to a new enemy, fan and rise a couple of times, rupture, target the next enemy, fan and rise a couple, just doing that over and over. I like just being able to focus on priority target, get some combo points and spread bleeds, and then hit more envenoms, which makes caustic spatter even better. I do think that maybe Crimson Tempest as a separate ability, I don't even know if that was really necessary, because it basically functions like a Fan of Knives, but it just costs more energy. It hits a little harder, but it has a bleed spread component, but like after you're done spreading bleeds with Crimson, you just pay a Fan of Knives. So you'll press Crimson when you need to spread bleeds, and otherwise you'll press Fan of Knives just because it's a little bit more efficient on your energy. I almost feel like Crimson Tempest could have just been like some kind of like an upgrade for Fan of Knives instead. Like some kind of a passive that maybe makes it so that Fan of Knives that costs, I don't know, it would cost about 35 energy, maybe make it like 45 or 40 energy, something along those lines, and it automatically will spread bleeds if it hits nearby targets. I feel like that also could have worked as well, but it's fine. As an ability, I do like it, and I do think that the base mechanic of spreading bleeds without having to change targets is amazing, and I think it allows Assassination to lean into this like single target focus damage playstyle that allows you to have additional cleave much better. It plays really good as long as you have the energy and as long as you spread your bleeds. Your energy is a little bit on the lower end ever since they nerfed Venomous Wounds a bit, so you're not going to have like that much energy, but it does play good and play fairly well, especially in large AoE situations, and I love just how easy it makes the whole bleed spread mechanic work, and it lets you do a ton of overall damage. So what I really like about Assassination, though, and what I think why it plays better in beta so far from Mythic Plus Dungeons, is they're really leaning into the single target focus playstyle that Assassination is known for. With the death mark, you mark a singular foe, and you're able to double up your bleeds and even poison effects on that target. The game wants you to really prioritize that singular enemy. Even Kingsbane is another talent, right? You put up Kingsbane Poison, but it actually has a pretty bad damage over time effect, but that effect can grow the more often you auto attack your target with lethal poisons. With the Venom, your auto attacks are more likely to apply poisons to that target, so you can grow the damage of that Kingsbane as well. Again, another talent that's primarily single target that wants you to focus on that singular enemy to wipe them out as quickly as possible so you can grow the damage of Kingsbane. And because this spec is so single target focused, which I think is a cool thematic take for Assassination, they made those AoE components, Spatter and all the other adjustments, but also Crimson Tempest and those adjustments, much more friendly to that pick a target, focus it down, and cleave everything around you. As Assassination, your fantasy is to mark an enemy for death and wipe him out, to assassinate him as quickly and efficiently as possible. So it makes it really easy in Mythic Plus Dungeons to just pick the toughest enemy in the group that has the most health, maybe the one that has some kind of like an AoE effect, so the longer they live, the more damage is going to be to your allies. Or potentially pick like, I don't know, I was doing a lot of pit runs, and the gargoyles there, the kidnap people that fly up in the sky and drop it from up high, those guys can be really annoying, but as Assassination, you're able to focus focus on breakthrough shields and take him out ridiculously quickly. And the casters are super pesky and annoying. As Assassination, I'm just able to singularly focus them while cleaving everything around you. So those priority targets and priority enemies get taken out very quickly as the Spec. And we've seen how good funnel and priority damage is in previous seasons of expansions like War Within. It's highly valued. Even though those specs may not do, let's say, overall the best damage, even though Assassination doesn't seem to have an issue with damage right now, but even though those specs don't do the greatest overall damage, that focus damage is incredibly good. And allows Assassination to really lean into that niche of high amount of focus damage without losing out on AoE with some of the updated tools we got in Midnight. It also helps out for the talent economy because previously Assassination could go like an AoE bleed build, but you lost out on single target talents. Or you could go for more poison talents, which were better in single target, but not as good in AoE, and you really had to make concessions when it comes to your talents. Assassination Spec tree has been simplified to such a degree where you don't really need to make that many concessions to pick up single target talents, or not that many concessions to pick up AoE talents, so you don't necessarily lose on one or the other field all that heavily. And since they allow you to really lean into that single target focus while getting free AoE and cleave and bleed spreads through various few talents, it just makes the Spec a lot more potent and a lot more consistent in my opinion. So I think it's probably better set up for Mythic Plus content than it's ever been before. Another component I want to talk about are the hero talents, because I actually think there may be some opportunity for Assassination to actually have some variety between Deathstalker and Fatebound since some of the Midnight changes. And primarily we'll look at those two from an AoE perspective, but right now it does seem like a lot of people are leaning into Deathstalker. I mean, it buffs the damage of Envenom, and Envenom spatters damage with caustic spatter to nearby targets. It's a playstyle that's proven itself pretty well in War Within, and it continues to have the same reputation going into Midnight. They also did give him a couple of new talent changes in order to make the AoE gameplay a little better. Like Clear the Witness is no longer Witnesses, it's no longer a talent that rotationally makes you want to press Phantom Knives even in single target. It just buffs the damage of Phantom Knives so your AoE is more consistent. They also give him some cool new talents in the right hand row like Precise Killer that gives you crit damage bonus, which is super cool and makes some of those guaranteed crit abilities like your Darkest Night even better, like watching those big crits pop up on your screen. Big fan of that altogether. They also made Mass Casualty, basically where Deathstalker's Mark, a portion of his damage now cleaves to all the targets afflicted by Rupture, which you can spare pretty easily. It doesn't mean the Deathstalker's Mark, which is primarily a single target mechanic, now can actually do some cleave damage, which is awesome. And then they have quite the Solaris, which allows Deathstalker's Mark to sometimes, when you apply it, to just immediately consume a stack, which means you can reach those Darkest Night procs for big Envenoms a lot more regularly, so it just makes Deathstalker allow you to benefit from its passive capstone a lot more aggressively. What I really do find annoying about Deathstalker still is Deathstalker's Mark. They did make it easier for you to spread it and allow it gets applied through a road on the target, but moving Deathstalker's Mark to a new target is still a pain. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I would love for them to potentially change this in the future. Maybe so instead of Deathstalker's Mark becoming a debuff you put on a target, why can't Deathstalker's Mark be a buff on the rogue instead? Right? Like when you go road to target, you get 3 stacks of a buff called Deathstalker's Mark on the rogue, and as you deal damage with finishers to an enemy, you will just do plague damage to that target, but it's a buff that is on you, not on that enemy. Because changing targets, changing enemies, like if my tank is chaining mobs from one to the next, I can no longer just vanish, ambush to chain my mark. I have to first go and spend all my finishers on that target to remove the mark, to put it on that new enemy that I want to make my high priority single target focus. I think that's Deathstalker's Mark, the actual debuff mechanic. They need to make it easier for you to swap it, or make it a buff on the rogue instead, so it'll be much easier to play into. But that's my really big concern with Deathstalkers. It's just those moments are still annoying, and they were annoying for a while. But I think out of anything, it looks like Assassination Rogue is going to play better in Midnight, but this mechanic, the annoying mechanic, still gets to stay in Midnight, which is unfortunate to see. However, there is also opportunity for you to make Fatebound work. Like if Deathstalker, let's say, is just annoying, there may be some opportunity for Fatebound to actually finally have some competitive AoE value. I mean, they changed up their talents quite drastically, and they actually have some nice bonuses, like Fate Intertwined, which is going to increase the effectiveness of your caustic spatter, going from 40% cleave damage of nature damage to nearby targets to 50%, and that is very strong. That is actually pretty good, at least on paper. Rush to the Inevitable grants you more energy anytime you flip a coin, and 15 energy whenever that coin lands on its edge, which usually happens during Deathmark windows. So this extra energy could potentially just allow you more consistent calm point building and spending. Then you also have things such as Deal Fate, where you can generate more calm points, and Envenoms can hit harder, so that actually hits on all the aspects of AoE damage and resource generation that Assassination can leverage playing Fatebound potentially. And they made the capstone even better. After flipping 7 coins, you get a lucky coin that grants you a temporary 15-second buff, increasing your agility by 4%, which is decent, and increases the damage and the damage amplification bonuses of Fatebound coins by 50%. Coin flips are more likely to match the same face as last flip, so you can stack up more cosmic damage on the target, or potentially the tails buff, which is a personal damage gain instead. So lucky coin can now be used more aggressively, more readily, and it no longer has this like RNG component. It's a lot more consistent, so you'll actually gain more value out of Fatebound, even if you don't get like the craziest RNG at all. There is still a bit of a question regarding the tuning of tails and heads, and they did add the Ravenhold Mint talent, where they can separately tune the damage of the damage buff of the heads or the cosmic damage of the tails. So they can actually tune this a little bit better, and if Fatebound receives enough tuning, this actually could be potentially a viable direction for Assassination to play into in Midnight when it comes to Mythic Plus dungeons. Deathstalker offering you some big burst damage, but Fatebound potentially offering you better calm point building, better energy, more consistent buff uptime, and could give you the flexibility that Deathstalker at the moment cannot provide, and that will create an interesting dichotomy between Deathstalker, which is a bit more rigid but very bursty, or Fatebound that's a bit more passive but also less restrictive and much better for your resources, which could potentially be somewhat viable heading into Midnight Mythic Plus content. But with that being said, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you did enjoy this Assassination Rogue overview or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like, as I would very much appreciate it. Also, be sure to join our Discord community, especially if you just want to keep up with any newest, biggest updates or for the Midnight Beta as it continues on through their development builds. With that, let me know all your thoughts in the comments, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.